The project I've studied is the Fjord City, which is a large project that is kind of based on the restructuring of the harbor from these industrial sites. And the Fjord City also evolved as a vision for the restructuring of Oslo's harbor areas, especially after the closure of large shipyards, as the one as you see to the left in the 1970s. And it was combined with the emerging view that people and their recreational needs and wants must be the main goal, and not cars and massive transport infrastructure in Oslo as elsewhere at that time. Associations of landscape and architecture associations and Oslo Heritage Society took the initiative in the beginning of the 1980s to organize an architectural concept competition, collaborating with the municipalities, private banks, and shipping companies to bring about a new vision for the city and its waterfront. Whereas several municipal plans for the waterfront were made throughout the 1990s, a range of experimental and analytical tools were used by the planning authorities during the 2000s that secured a shared vision for the Fjord City, and increased competence among stakeholders about quality urban development prior to the adoption of the municipal Fjord City plan in 2008. To the left, you see the 11 sub-areas that constitute the Fjord City project, with Bjørvika, that I will talk about today, being the first prestigious sub-area developed on the eastern parts of the waterfront, amounting to 70 hectares. The Fjord City sub-areas share principles of quality, such as demands for a large share of public space. They are connected by a harbor promenade, mounting up to 20 meters broad. Street grids and parks should connect them to the neighboring districts, the city behind, as we call it in Oslo. But there is also emphasis on diversities between these 11 sub-areas. So one example of the use of soft tools is the use of vision planning that aims to draw scenarios of the future that can assemble public and private agents around a common direction. Oslo planning authorities organized a multidisciplinary workshop on scenario building in Bjørvika that lasted a whole week. Public participation was not the goal here, but to bring together external architectural and other competencies in exploring future possibilities. By using these kinds of soft tools, the planning authorities established a quality culture, I would say, building on a vision of a fjord city as a basis for building scenarios on 3 topics. Scenarios on an international metropolis, a networked and connected city, and a green cities. And these are scenarios that the development project still draws upon. Together with art intervention, cultural programming, and architect competitions, the use of these soft tools build competencies and shared knowledge among the stakeholders involved in the development of Bjørvika. So the network governance model selected in Bjørvika is based on substantial negotiation with the municipality of Oslo and national government in the lead. Mainly pseudo-public development or / real estate companies develop the proper estates, but they have established a common development company, Bjørvika Utvikling, to develop public spaces and road and technical infrastructure and to assure a holistic development. And to the figure to the right, you can see the ownership structure of Bjørvika, which is only Entra Eiendom to the upper right is the private company involved. And these landowners, mainly public then, own together Bjørvika Development, or Bjørvika Utvikling in Norwegian, and Bjørvika Infrastructure. I think there is both an interesting connection and tension when we build cities today between the competitive drive characterizing entrepreneurial or market-led redevelopment processes in European cities and the competences held by professionals and planners, and perhaps also by the developers themselves. I believe these tensions are reduced in Bjørvika due to the combination of political control, negotiations, and network governance that are formalized by legal tools. And one of these legal tools used in Oslo is a contract between the stakeholders in Bjørvika that was signed in 2003. It assures delegation of responsibilities. For instance, that the municipality provides social infrastructure such as schools and kindergartens, as is most often the case in Oslo's development policies. Landowners fund physical infrastructure such as public space by contributing with a sum for each square meter developed that Bjørvika infrastructure delivers. And the rentability of land at Oslo's waterfront and the density and scale of constructions allowed in Bjørvika in particular implies that Oslo municipality could bargain for physical infrastructure contributions. I believe the combination of formal and informal quality delivery tools used in Bjørvika strengthens the quality of design. First, City Council included a range of quality guidelines in the regulation plan, which was adopted by City Council in 2003, and as such assuring a large share of public space and encourages quality by instructing developers to provide guidance tools. Second, the Planning Authority and Bjørvika Utvikling have built competencies among the stakeholders through continuous provision of additional guidelines, workshops, and carried out with professionals, as well as arenas for debates developed. So the soft tools used inform stakeholders about urban design quality and its value to the built environment. The political engagement and the negotiation typical of the networked governance model resulted in higher quality public space. Today, the planning authorities hold that developers have increased the return of investments in public space, and that this has altered investors and developers to more eagerly emphasize and invest in public space development. Which was not the case when they negotiated for these kinds of contracts, where the developers and investors were not so eager to contribute with these kinds of funding to the public space development. This has turned according to today's planners. I also think the presence of several public cultural institutions testify to the will of municipal and national authorities to invest in urban development, and also to provide institutions that serve as public arenas. Bjørvika's cultural institutions result from bold political decisions, actually, but these were also decisions that contribute to secure investment in the area. And here you see some examples of them. To the left, in the rear, you see the Munch Museum that was supposed to open this year, but didn't then. And in the front, you see one of the commons, one of the main public spaces in Bjørvika and its qualities. It's called the Akerselva Common. To the upper right, you see the Opera House that was opened in 2008 and which won the architecture competition due to its design where you can walk on the roof. So it has become a very popular public space, both for inhabitants of Oslo and its visitors. And in the bottom, you see the interior of the main public library that opened this year, that is located next to the National Opera. I think Oslo lost its innocence with the rise of Bjørvika. We had been a provincial city, kind of an everyday life city, and suddenly we were to become a metropolis. And I don't think the inhabitants were prepared for this transition. They didn't see how the rising buildings could benefit neighboring districts and their own desires. The area is indeed exclusive and it's planned as such. Though building design is in some cases more creative, it seems that the architecture is rather generic and based on market demand and modes. So public spaces and arenas are therefore key to secure social diversity in Bjørvika, and that make the seaside materially and symbolically accessible to the inhabitants. In 2008, the City District Council commissioned an alternative plan for Bjørvika prior to the adoption of the Fjord City plan. The plan included the coverage of the railway tracks blocking Bjørvika from the working class area Grønland behind. Though the alternative plan influenced politicians to make some small revisions in the Fjord City plan, it was probably more of a wake-up call to politicians about the lack of information and public participation during the redevelopment process than anything else. So to make some minor and brief conclusions about what I think is transferable from the case of Oslo, I do believe that vision planning is a quality tools when you want to assemble a range of actors and not the least public, pseudo-public and private actors in large scale redevelopment projects such as Bjørvika and Fjord City to assemble around a common direction. I also think that political involvement is a key, and that the tools that were included in the legal documents that ground the Bjørvika and the Fjord City planning is very much central to its success, as is the network governance model, which includes a long-term negotiation, and it's also driven by both competitive and competence aspects here. I also think that connectivity and holistic development is a very central aspect of large-scale development that needs to be considered and implemented, which I think is one of the successful aspects of the Fjord City and its 11 sub-areas, especially with the focus on public spaces and public arenas, which truly and by necessity secures accessibility and the democratic aspects of urban redevelopment. So by emphasizing the role of public space, I think I will end my presentation there. Thank you.